The auditorium at the Maneuver Center of Excellence hums with low voices and the rustle of uniforms as a precision shooting symposium shifts between speakers. Rear Admiral Mark Ellison, a Navy SEAL in crisp service dress blues, moves along the aisle with easy authority. His gaze catches the geometric ink on Captain Claire Redding's forearm, edges of the pattern showing when her sleeve rides up as she adjusts a badge lanyard. Claire stands steady, a U.S. Army infantry officer with a Ranger tab and the calm, squared posture of a senior instructor at the U.S. Army sniper course. Ellison lets his voice carry just enough to be heard by the nearby rows, asking what her rating is and whether she belongs in admin or supply. The air tightens. Rangers look over from a block of seats. Special Forces instructors go quiet. 2 Delta operators stop mid-whisper, and an Air Force Special Tactics NCO tilts his head like he is dialing in a wind call. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Whitaker watches from the aisle, hands behind his back, saying nothing. The room settles into professional silence that feels heavier than noise. Someone mentions a live fire demonstration for the morning, and the idea sticks like a posted order. Start time set for 8:30 a.m. A slide advances and light from the projector washes the rows, catching the tattoo again as if to ask a question no one answers yet. The image holds in the mind longer than the applause. Captain Claire Redding is 31, an infantry officer in the U.S. Army with a Ranger tab and the steady presence of a senior instructor at the U.S. Army sniper course under the Maneuver Center of Excellence at Fort Moore. She came out of West Point with a straight look and a stubborn work ethic, then earned Distinguished Graduate at the sniper course by meeting the hard standard. Her record shows 4 combat deployments, a Bronze Star Medal with V device, and 2 Purple Hearts. None of it reads loud, but it holds weight when she walks a firing line. There is a layer that is not on the classroom slide. For 3 years, she was attached to Joint Special Operations Command for counter-sniper and overwatch work in Mosul, Ramadi, and Fallujah. The details stay behind doors, but the habits remain in how she checks angles, how she listens to wind, how she treats silence as part of the shot. She carries those habits into every block she teaches. Fort Moore is busy with visiting elements from Rangers, Special Forces, Delta, Navy SEALs, and Air Force Special Tactics, and the mood is professional with a quiet seam of doubt. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Whitaker, a former Delta operator, is the one who pushed to bring her onto the cadre based on what she had done downrange. Claire stands with relaxed shoulders, eyes moving in measured scans, posture calm and centered, the look of competence rather than performance. Her instruction is built on decision-making, positive identification, wind calls, sector discipline, and safety. And the standard does not bend for anyone. The break between segments turns the auditorium into a low murmur of badges and coffee as Rear Admiral Mark Ellison steps to the aisle beside Captain Claire Redding. He asks if her deployments were actual combat or only support roles and lets the question hang. Claire answers with the steady posture of someone who has been there, not with heat. The nearby rows of Rangers, Special Forces, Delta, Navy SEALs, and Air Force Special Tactics listen and keep their faces neutral. Captain Nolan Pierce, a Green Beret instructor, suggests a public live fire at Range 37 the next morning, so the discussion can be settled by process, not opinion. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Whitaker authorizes it on the spot as a training demonstration under the U.S. Army Sniper Course, not a formal evaluation or competition. Claire nods once and says she will be ready. Ellison gives no argument, only a clipped acknowledgement that reads as confidence in his position. Word moves through the room in short, professional phrases, and the noise level drops instead of rising. Notebooks close. Phones go away, and a few instructors check their schedules. Someone confirms the start at 0830 and repeats it as 8:30 a.m. for the program notes. The mood settles into a quiet that feels like the pause before a range goes hot. Montana gave Claire Redding an education before she wore a uniform. Her grandfather had been a Marine at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, and he carried winter in his bones. He took her into open country for mule deer, where impatience meant a long track across bad ground. She learned to slow her breath, let the sights settle, and wait until the shot belonged to her. Snow fields and wind were teachers that did not speak, but they were clear. Claire learned to count heartbeats and read mirage off sage and rock. She learned that the hardest act was restraint, not trigger press. Those quiet lessons stayed with her longer than any trophy on a wall. When the Army opened infantry to women in 2016, she saw a path that matched what she believed about service. She graduated from West Point and put in for Ranger School, even when mentors warned about the grind. The mountain phase took weight and skin from her hands. Yet the standard did not move, and she met it anyway. She came home leaner, tougher, and certain that patience under stress was a skill you could train. At the U.S. Army Sniper course, she earned Distinguished Graduate through performance. Not by exception. Her instructors saw the same calm that had settled over cold draws in Montana, now shaped by range cards, wind calls, and positive identification. Every repetition was a small choice to do the simple thing well. That is the foundation she carries onto every firing line. Discipline before speed, judgment before noise. Mosul pressed close on a hot afternoon. Concrete and wires and broken glass. Captain Claire Redding lay on a rooftop in Overwatch for a conventional infantry patrol that was moving through a walled block. A burst snapped from a building complex about 300 meters out, and a Delta element went to ground behind a low wall. Claire slid into the scope and let the world narrow to angles and light. She ran PID on the firing point, searching for shape and movement instead of noise. Range estimation matched her dope. Mirage drifted right to left, and the wind call settled at a slight hold. An 8-inch window opening flashed a sliver of contrast where a muzzle had shown a moment before. She breathed out, pressed the trigger, and felt the clean break like a switch flipping. Comms stayed short and professional. Delta shifted as the pressure eased. The infantry patrol kept security, and Claire scanned for a second shooter before calling the lane clear. The shot had traveled through dust and glare, but the math was simple when the fundamentals were clean. She logged the engagement and reset her sectors because the street was not done just because a rifle was quiet. Above it all, a Predator full-motion video feed had watched the same window flare and go still. Within 48 hours, Joint Special Operations Command sent a request for a temporary attachment. No ceremony. Just orders and a slot. Claire packed light and carried the same habits she had used on the rooftop. Overwatch first. Restraint first. Every press earned by PID and a wind call that made sense. Ramadi ran hot and dusty as Captain Claire Redding and Sergeant First Class James Carter took an Overwatch position for a sensitive site exploitation. They worked as a shooter-spotter team, glassing rooftops and alleys while the assault element cleared rooms. Pre-mission reconnaissance had marked a nearby elevation as cold, and that note lived in the back of her head as she scanned. The first crack came from above that sector as Carter shifted to help her angle, and the round found the small gap in his movement. Claire worked the bolt on instinct and forced the world to slow. Urban Mirage wavered across a long lane. Distance read at 870 meters. Wind, light but twitchy, against the edges of her hold. Elevation and parallax checked. Breathing smoothed. Trigger press clean. And the firing point went still through glass. She called it, kept comms short, and scanned for a second threat while the team requested a medevac. The care was fast and by the book with TCCC steps moving in tight sequence. The wounds were not survivable in the time they had, and the aircraft could not bridge that gap, no matter how straight the flight. Claire kept security and logged the engagement, but a 3-second lapse in sector discipline sat heavier than the rifle. Later she wrote the lesson the only way it would stick. Teach the next class to hold their lane, to prioritize threats, and to make calm choices that keep teammates alive. The senior officer quarters at Fort Moore are quiet enough to hear the hum in the vents and the soft tick of a wall clock. Captain Claire Redding sits on the edge of the bed with a worn photo of herself and Sergeant First Class James Carter, taken mid-mission when dust clung to everything. The picture feels heavier than paper, and she lets the silence settle until her breathing matches the still room. She sets the photo down and rolls her sleeve to study the geometric ink on her forearm. She traces the shapes with a fingertip and explains in her own head what they mean. It is a private task force memorial code, not any official Army practice. With diamonds marking 10 confirmed and circles marking 5. The public count is grounded as 160 plus confirmed and over 300 total effects assessed. Much of it still classified under Joint Special Operations Command. The marks are not trophies. They are reminders to move slow, think clean, and earn every press. Her gear sits laid out by habit with straps flat and glass wiped. She runs a quiet check for the morning event at range 37 set for 8:30 a.m. and keeps the plan simple. Box breathing steadies the body with 4 in. Hold. 4 out. Hold. Until her heart rate feels like a metronome. She centers on patience, sector discipline, and the promise she carries into every block at the U.S. Army Sniper course under the Maneuver Center of Excellence. Then turns out the light and lets the calm do the rest. Morning settles over range 37 as the range safety officer faces the firing line and delivers the brief with steady cadence. He covers muzzle awareness, trigger discipline, and a clear backstop, then reminds the crowd of the commands line is hot and line is cold. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Whitaker states that this is a training demonstration run by the U.S. Scene Note, Army Sniper Course under the Maneuver Center of Excellence. Not a formal evaluation. The joint audience stands easy and quiet while instructors check lanes and flags. Captain Claire Redding readies an M2010 enhanced sniper rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum with a military-grade optic and a solid bipod on packed earth. Her dope is confirmed for the cool morning air and light wind. She rolls shoulders, settles breath, and waits for the call. The course of fire is compressed and clear. 8 targets from 500 to 1,000 meters. A moving plate at 1,000. And a partial exposure hostage plate at 800. All inside 2 minutes. The start is posted for 0830 and repeated as 8:30 a.m. for the program notes. The range safety officer holds strict control while Rangers, Special Forces, Delta, Navy SEALs, and Air Force Special Tactics watch without chatter. The range safety officer calls the line hot and the air thins to focus. Captain Claire Redding settles into a stable prone supported position with the M2010 enhanced sniper rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, bipod planted, toes dug in. She confirms stock weld, natural point of aim, parallax, and a light right-to-left wind call. Density altitude favors predictable flight, and her breathing cadence slides into a steady count. Target 1 sits at 500 meters with near zero wind. Claire scans, holds, presses, and verifies. The plate snaps center in about 6 seconds and she is already shifting. Target 2 at 650 meters needs a mild crosswind correction. A clean hold, a smooth press, and a quick impact around 14 seconds total. Targets 3 through 6 run at 700, 800, 900, and 950 meters. She stays methodical. Small dial or hold adjustments, clean trigger brakes, and disciplined follow-through before moving the reticle. Mirage rolls light over the berms, but the pattern is consistent. She reaches roughly 83 seconds with 4 more clean impacts and no wasted movement. Target 7 is a mover at 1,000 meters. Walking pace, cutting across a shallow angle. Claire tracks without snatching, sets lead, watches the wind cycle, and waits for the moment where everything aligns. The shot goes with a steady press and 2 seconds of flight time. Then the plate reacts. The running total settles near 1 minute 47 seconds. The final plate is a partial exposure hostage at 800 meters. Only 8 inches of metal beside a no-shoot silhouette. Claire lets her heart rate settle to the metronome from the night before. Refines parallax. Refines elevation. And refuses to rush the follow-through. The hit is clean, and she stops the clock near 1 minute 56 seconds. The crowd stays quiet while the range safety officer manages the line. Rear Admiral Mark Ellison requests one more challenge, and Whitaker nods to the RSO. Claire moves to a fresh firing point with an M24 in 7.62 by 51 mm. One round is loaded. No warm-up. The range officer calls 750 meters. Full exposure. And Claire estimates range confirmation. Checks parallax and elevation. Reads the breeze on grass and dust. Then presses for center. The line goes cold, and the reaction is brief and respectful from Rangers. Special Forces, Delta, Navy SEALs, and Air Force Special Tactics. The field stays professional, and the quiet feels earned. The range goes quiet as Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Whitaker steps forward and invites Captain Claire Redding to join him at the line. She rolls her sleeve, and the camera lingers on the geometric tattoo, while range dust lifts and settles in the light. Whitaker explains that it is a private task force memorial code, not an official Army practice. With diamonds marking 10 confirmed, and circles marking 5. He frames the record as 160 plus confirmed and over 300 total effects assessed, with much of it still classified under Joint Special Operations Command. Sergeant Major Lucas Grant from Delta speaks first to a shared mission where Claire's Overwatch identified a counterattack position before it unfolded and kept his team from being flanked. An Air Force Special Tactics NCO adds a concise confirmation about her sector discipline and clean calls under pressure. A Green Beret instructor follows with a brief note on her judgment when targets were crowded and time was thin. And he keeps the details tight to protect sensitive procedures. The statements land without flourish. Just enough to make the picture clear. Rear Admiral Mark Ellison stands in view and says nothing, his posture shifting from certainty to reflection as the implications settle across the firing line. The joint audience maintains professional decorum, boots still and hands quiet while the range safety officer watches the line. Whitaker closes by recognizing Claire's selection for promotion to major and her assignment as Deputy Chief Instructor at the U.S. Army Sniper Course under the Maneuver Center of Excellence. The moment holds on the sleeve fabric, the scuffed deck, and the weight of silence that means respect. The formal announcement comes through the board with clean language and clear dates. Captain Claire Redding is selected for promotion to major and is frocked to wear 04 rank before her pay catches up. She is assigned as Deputy Chief Instructor at the U.S. Army Sniper Course under the Maneuver Center of Excellence at Fort Moore. She works inside a straightforward chain that runs through the Chief Instructor and the Infantry School leadership. And the recognition is delivered in a short, professional setting. Her first moves focus on training that is realistic and safe. Scenarios tighten to mirror contested urban terrain, while the range safety officer controls every lane and safety standard. Students drill sector discipline, positive identification, urban mirage management, solid wind calls, and decision-making under time pressure. Range cards, disciplined shot timers, and concise after-action reviews become routine, while classification boundaries remain firm. Claire invites instructors with recent time and contested environments, and keeps their material within approved guidance. The effect shows up fast across special operations forces and conventional units as graduates carry habits back to teams. First round hits under stress improve. Safety corrections drop. And the quiet skepticism that trailed her gives way to respect. Pride stays in the results, not the applause. And the lesson is simple. Teaching is a duty, and standards save lives. Sunday comes soft and early at Arlington. Major Select Claire Redding kneels by the headstone of Sergeant First Class James Carter and rests a palm on cool stone. The grass is trimmed short, and the air feels clean enough to clear a long week. She lets the quiet work and thinks about what they built from a hard lesson. Her mind runs through the new blocks at the U.S. Army Sniper course under the Maneuver Center of Excellence. Students learn patience in their breath, sector discipline that does not drift, and positive identification that holds when the clock pushes. Scenarios are tighter and safer, and the range safety officer keeps every lane honest. She has started to see young shooters carry those habits back to their teams, and it feels like a promise kept. Back at Fort Moore, a short official letter sits in a folder on her desk. Rear Admiral Mark Ellison acknowledges that his earlier judgment came from incomplete information and recognizes her record with simple language. She files it without reply and gets on with the work. Leaving Arlington, she drives with a steady cadence of box breathing. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. Hold. And the day opens a little. If you have ever been judged by how you look or where someone thinks you belong, tell your story and how you answered with performance.